Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of PM Learning Series. My name is Shavi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn. And today with me, I have Tamar, Chief Product Officer at Slack. Tamar, we're so honored to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yep, for those who are joining us live today, please introduce yourself, where you are tuning in from, and what you're hoping to learn from Tamar. Looking forward to hear from you. And this is part of LinkedIn Learning's Product Management Learning Series, a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product practitioners share their PM journey and lessons learned to help inspire current as well as aspiring PM to level up their product career. So please subscribe to our newsletter to receive event recaps as well as future event updates. Now, without further ado, I think, Tamar, we'd like to learn a little bit about your career journey, especially your early career exploration, how you get into the world of product, and how you get to where you are today.
Sure. So I actually started as an engineer. I have a degree in computer science, and I worked as an engineer for many years and as an engineering manager. And then I was at a startup, and there was no head of product, and there was not really a product team. And that's kind of you in startups, you wear lots of different hats. And that's when I started working in product management, was in one of the startups I was at. And then I slowly migrated to doing more product management versus engineering. I was doing both for a while. And then when I joined Google, Google had very separated product and engineering at the time, and had to decide which path to take. And that's when I was a product management director. I joined Google in that way. And since then, I've also gone back and forth a little bit, but there's a lot of overlap when you're in engineering management and product management. There's obviously differences, but there's overlap. So Google is my first job, only PM, and then now again as the chief product officer at Slack, I've managing product design, research and analytics, and our developer relations, and also the CE team, the customer support team. But it's a windy road.
Absolutely. Career is never linear.
No.
I'm sure a lot of people are currently working as engineers and thinking about just similar paths as you, like should I become a product manager, help in charge of the product charter, the roadmap a little bit more. I heard that a lot. And
You
also
have
we
to,
have a
you
yeah,
have to
sorry.
try different things, especially when you're earlier in your career. Try them on and see what you like. Go for a year and do something else.
Absolutely. We have a lot of folks, a very international crowd. You will be amazed. We have Ying Chan from Helsinki, Camilla from Montreal, Canada, someone from Egypt, Cairo, Sunny Linden, finally Sunny and Linden, someone from Boston, Indonesia, Los Angeles, LA, India, Nigeria, more people from Canada, Bangalore, Mexico, AMIA. Wow, this is quite a very amazing crew. Thanks for joining us today.
I love it. I love the international people from all over. It's wonderful.
Thank you. It's very exciting to be able to share your story, Tamar, with such a global audience and international crowd. So, for folks who are joining, don't forget you can drop your question in the chat. What you are hoping to learn from Tamar. So, Tamar, I think one thing about your career journey, when I was studying your LinkedIn profile, what struck me was that you had the opportunity to work at Google and Amazon during some of its most hyper growth phase. I think that's a very exciting time to join a company. And what would you say were some of the best lessons you learned from both companies? Did you had a chance also to work with the founders? What did you learn from them?
Uh, it was very interesting. Every company has their DNA and their unique culture. And I would say at Amazon, it really is customer obsessed. They talk about it and they really are. And everything is about the customer. And Jeff Bezos is very much about the customer. I was really lucky to join Amazon when it was still pretty small and got to interact with him directly. That years later, I probably never would have gotten that opportunity. But he was very consistent in what he would say. So you knew what he was going to ask you. You knew he was going to ask you, how is this relevant to the customer? And so you could prepare because you knew what he cared about. And I remember if he would come into a review meeting with a piece of paper, you knew you were in trouble because there was going to be some printout of a page that you were responsible for where he'd go, why is this here? And so you get really nervous if the piece of paper came out. So that was my first learning of how to truly be customer focused. I mean, Amazon also uses metrics and all of that, but that was, I think, the thing that differentiated them. And then Google, what differentiates Google is its scale. As I said, both are very metrics driven, experimentation driven, but the scale at Google is one that I had never seen. I was used to talking in millions, and I got to Google and everything had a B in front of it or after it. And it took you a while to really realize what that meant. And one of the things that it meant was, as a product manager, if you introduced a small bug, it could impact a million people. And so you really had to be careful. So I would tell people when they join the search team, you think you can just make a change, but you really have to be careful about what the ripple effects were. So we had a pretty strong process, a weekly search review process. It was the search relevance meeting where any experiment was reviewed by a set of experts who had been in search for a long time so that they could really understand what the impact was. And if you were a product manager, had been in the company just a year, you might not understand how all of these dynamics work together. So when you do have that kind of scale, you need the processes to make sure that you're doing it right. And that was one of my big takeaways at Google.
Absolutely. As a PM who's currently working on search, I really appreciate, some of the things that you said. Search stack is very complex, and a lot of times machine learning algorithm feels like a black box. You don't really know what's going on. And so it's great to hear how Google does it. And it also, a lot of times we operate at, like you said, varying level of talents, right? Some people know the stack really well. Some people are new to the team. I like how you use process to kind of balance out the different level of degrees of expertise. You mentioned about being customer focused. I knew that that's one of the core principles for Amazon, being customer obsession. And we talk a lot about that in product management, right? I think what would be most helpful for us, as current or aspiring PM, is to learn about how you actually identify and, more importantly, operationalize that customer insight. Can you share maybe an example or two from your time at Slack or elsewhere where you really identify the customer, voice, being customer first, customer focused? What was the process around, operationalize that insight to build breakthrough products?
I think one of the keys at Slack is to have lots of different processes. There isn't one because there are lots of ways you get customer input. We get customer input from Twitter, from Zendesk, from our salespeople, from our customer success people, from our friends and relatives. There's so many different ways that you get feedback, and you need to figure out how to capture the different pieces of feedback, and we have different processes. So we have product specialists, and our product specialists are connected to our customer experience team who help field the Zendesk tickets and the tweets and the kind of volume that's coming in from people across the web and who report issues and feedback. And they used to come directly to the engineers, and we realized we needed somebody who would help collate them and help us prioritize. So we have our product specialists. We have a program called Voice of the Customer, which is through our CSMs, where we come up with a product gaps list. So this is more from our enterprise customers. We have our product gaps. We use Slack Connect to talk to what we call our Slack champions, and we will ask them questions in our Slack Connect channel with our champions. We will put out prototypes and pilots to our champions, get feedback. We have a pretty robust pilot program where we have new features. We'll put out pilots. So we use all of these techniques. And as a PM, you have to know what you're working on, which one to lean on most, but you have to understand all of them because together they give the voice of the customer. I'll give one example of a feature that we launched pretty recently called Huddles. Give a shout out if you've used Huddles. It's if you're looking at Slack on the bottom left-hand corner, there's a toggle if you're in a DM or channel to start a huddle where you can It's an audio conversation, a frictionless audio conversation. We are big believers in prototyping. We prototype, then we will do user studies based on the prototype. So user research is also a very big part of our process. All throughout the stage, different types of user research, depending on what stage of the product you're in, but we'll do user research. The user researchers work really closely with the designers and product managers. Then we'll do a pilot. Well, actually, first we'll put it out internally and get feedback internally. We'll dog food everything that we do. Then we'll do a pilot, get feedback, then maybe another round of user research. So on Huddle specifically, we got some really good pilot feedback that we tweaked the product as a result. And then we also went to our enterprise customers to say, what kind of controls do you need? So one of the things that's important is that these all need to be fast. We do not use a waterfall process and say, let's spec everything out, then we build everything, then we get feedback. It's very highly iterative with the customer front and center in every iteration of the product.
Absolutely. I love that. I think it resonated with people. We have a couple Huddle fans or folks who are excited to try Huddle. We also have questions. I think you sort of addressed them. Preeti was asking, how early do you need customer involvement in the product development process? I think, like you said, as early as possible, but also there's a continuous discovery element to it. So it doesn't stop once you start developing the product. I like how you started with internal pilot, doc through the product, and then eventually scale out doing pilot. Do you have specific tips around?
I want to add one other thing. We absolutely get customer feedback throughout, and it's key. You have to, as a product manager, be careful to not always listen to everything the customer asks for. And I know that everybody knows that in theory, but customers will sometimes ask for what they know, and they're steer you in a direction to replicating other things as opposed to making a leap. So you have to be able to get all the feedback. You have to listen to all the feedback, and then you have to decide which feedback you're actually going to act on.
Do you have specific frameworks around how you decide what feedback to take in versus we hear you, but it's not a priority yet?
That's a really good question. I would say that it's more that you have to have your goals and your principles for the product and what you're trying to achieve. So you have to have that strategy of why, what problems are you trying to solve? You're not trying to solve every problem the customer has, but you have to know what jobs to be done if you use that framework. So we just subscribe to the idea of jobs to be done. I wouldn't say we follow it exactly, but the idea of understanding what pain point you're solving and why your company is better equipped to solve it than anyone else, because you want to make sure that you're adding enough value for the customers by doing it in your product. So that's the thing, is if you really are grounded in the strategy, then it will help guide you on which feedback to listen to.
Absolutely. Do you feel like in current hybrid and remote work environment since the pandemic, has any of this product design, customer insight process changed because of the pandemic and how work is being distributed?
So our product development process didn't change, but the tools we need to use have changed. So when you're all fully distributed and your customers are distributed, we're like, wait, we don't have all the tools that we need in order to do what we need. So definitely our philosophy of prototyping the path, which is one of our product principles, getting the customer input, none of that changed. But we were in a really unique and lucky position that we could build some of the tools that we needed. So again, Huddles was a good example of, we missed being able to tap somebody on the shoulder in the office or walk by their desk and have a quick conversation. So we built it into Slack. We built in video clips because we missed the ability to have, we wanted to improve on the ability to have asynchronous conversations also with our customers, because we can send video clips to our customers. And we started leaning much more heavily on Slack Connect for our conversation with our customers. So we have our customer advisory board, our cabs, which obviously went all remote, but we have Slack Connect channels with our cab members. And it actually is better, because instead of just having a cab meeting once a quarter, you have a channel that you can have continuous conversations with your cab members. So those are the things that we've changed, using our tools in different ways to have more continuous, flexible, and asynchronous conversations.
Absolutely, I love that. I think I just want to double click on some of it because I think our members are also very interested to learn. One of them was curious to ask about what is a typical cycle time for iteration. And then Samir is curious to learn how do you decide when to have a more elaborate or deliberate, like longer cycle, full-fledged discovery process versus just quickly jump in through some ideas for quick iteration for smaller feature development. How do you find that balance?
So I wish that there was just a simple answer to this because a lot of it is instinct and experience and gut feeling. But I would say always iterate fast. So when I say prototype the path, what it means is if we have an idea, just quickly get something up and running so you can feel it. None of us are good enough to look at a mock-up and say yes or no, this is a good or bad idea. You have to try it. And when you try it with real data and in a real usage, you're going to get a much different impression. So we always err on try and prototype something quickly. When we haven't, it's always been a mistake. Now, there's some features like international data residency. That's totally different. An infrastructure feature that's not as much a user interface and it's not as easy to prototype. That's a different ballgame. Like enterprise key management, you need to sit with customers, you need to understand it, you need to spec it out. So I'd say those type of features are different, but you also need to make sure you're getting the customer feedback early and not writing a full spec, implementing everything and then saying here, like, make sure you're getting that early and being able to iterate. So the type of iteration may look different. To the first question of what's the timeline, it varies based on the feature. But what we try and do is get something out to pilot fast. Sometimes getting it to GA can take a while because if you're an enterprise company, everything you do needs to work with all the compliance and security features. So you can get to a pilot with a small company quickly to make sure you're building the right thing. And then it might take a little bit longer to fill in all the features you need. And so another one of our focuses is making sure that those are as fast as possible, that you have as much engineering infrastructure as you can to make those as easy for engineers as possible.
Absolutely. I think your comment earlier on knowing your goals and priorities in order to understand what to prioritize, where to get feedback really resonate with our LinkedIn member, Harrison. So we also have another, I think, great question. Have you ever experienced any, unconscious bias sometimes when it comes to product development or user feedback? If so, do you have some mechanisms built in to kind of mitigate that or build more awareness around things that might cause unconscious bias?
That's a great question. And I think there's two keys to avoiding that. One, having a diverse team. So, and diversity of everything, diversity of thought, diversity of gender, background. So if you have a diverse team, you're going to get those diverse perspectives in your product development, and also make sure your research is pooling from a diverse set. So we try very hard for our user research to make sure our research is pooling from a very diverse set.
Absolutely. I think diversity can add a lot of different angles that for things that might not be obvious given what your background was. So having a diverse team helps to uncover those biases. I wanted to shift the focus from doing user research and customer insight to more around your leadership and management style. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it, people actually have a lot of question around, not just your leadership and management style, but also understanding kind of some of the challenges that you face leading a product-led organization. So maybe we start with Yan's question around what is the hardest part of leading a product-led organization?
Well, let me first say leading a product organization is a lot of fun. So it's just building products for customers and building products that people love and being able to bring joy to people that you've built something that makes them happy. That's awesome. Obviously, when you build something that people don't like as much, that's, you have to work to fix it. But I think the hardest part is putting yourself in the shoes of the customer. And you have to be very careful, especially in a product like Slack, where we use it every day, all day. But we are such power users that we can't build the product for ourselves. And we have to hold people back and say, no, these features, I know you need them, but 95% of our customers would never use this, and that's what they use. So I think there are different questions about kind of leadership and leading an organization and the product aspect. So I'd say on the product aspect, it's continually grounding yourself on who the customer actually is and meeting with customers all the time. And everyone should also be themselves meeting with customers because it has a different emotional resonance. So I think that's the hardest thing, is continuing to hold that bar. On the leadership style, which you asked, I think a lot of what's really important in leading any organization, not just a product organization, is transparency and listening. And there's a lot of overlap between like understanding your customers, understanding your team, but you have to understand, you have to listen and hear what the issues are, and you can't sweep them under the rug. And you have to be very transparent in your thinking. You're going to make decisions that people don't like. You're going to cancel projects that were somebody's like baby and they really cared about. You're going to make organizational changes that there's some people are very upset with. So you can't win everyone over all the time, but the best that you can do is be transparent and show your thinking. And people will respect why you made the decision if they understand it, as opposed to just saying, this is what I've decided.
Absolutely. I think what I hear from you is active listening skill, that empathy, that sense of humbleness. Actually, like, you thought you knew the customer, but maybe not. Like, you need a continuous listening, continuously challenge your beliefs. And I like the call out around, sometimes you're just not going to make decisions that will keep everyone happy, but be comfortable making those uncomfortable decisions.
I would say if you're a leader and you've never made a decision that made somebody unhappy, you're probably doing something wrong.
Absolutely. We have one LinkedIn user who's curious about not just the leadership and management style, but actually the org structure. So, for example, at Slack, do you align PM teams based on specific feature, or align to the problems that you're solving? How do you think about structuring a product org?
So I see it also as fluid. There isn't one structure that is the right structure. The structure can depend on a point in time when what is most important. It can depend on the people and the leaders that you have. So I definitely get this question a lot. What is the right way to structure? And my answer is really there isn't a right way, because you're going to have seams in any organization. If you structure it by features, then you're going to have cross-functional teams aligned on the problem. If you structure it by the problem, you're going to have to align for like who's actually writing the code for the feature. So any way you do it, you're going to have both people working in the team and people working across the team. So what's more important is understanding the structure you pick and where those seams are, and making sure those seams are as tight as possible. So identify where so you want the team to be working together where the decisions need to be the fastest. And then across, you need to make sure cross team collaboration that does not cause overhead, and that the fewest people will be in the room. So that's the way that we think about it. And if it's not working, you change it. And you can't be afraid to change it. You have to say, okay, this team actually was a horizontal team, but it's not working. We need to make a change. There was an SVP at Google who famously said about the seams of the organization that you organize them one way, you look at the seams, and they naturally start to get wider. And once they get too wide, you cloud them and you reorganize the other way.
I love how you mentioned about aligning actually the org structure to help you make better decisions, and align again, like reflecting on being customer first and customer focused. I think that resonates with our member Rahul, as well as previously you mentioned about how even the skills that you develop as a PM leader, right? Transparency, listening, I think also helps to making sure you're building the empathy for the customer.
Well, let me add the point with the person who just said about you don't want your product to structure you just have to be aware of it, and you have to fight against it, and you have to be very clear in your reviews when you're talking. If there's a feature team, well, what about this and what about that, and how And your usability team, your user researchers can really help here. So one thing that we do at Slack is we have a customer journey, and the customer journey is a layer above and is not about teams. It's about a customer for onboarding, from consideration of the product to onboarding to habituation to getting work done. So the customer journey crosses all of the features and crosses all of the teams. And we use the language from the customer journey, like what phase are you in now? And then at each phase, it says what the challenges are. So your user research team is very key to making sure the customer and how they're viewing the product is front and center.
I love the cross-team customer journey. So everyone is looking at the same, journey, problems, using the same language, like you said, that the customer is using to solve the right problem. So we talk about how to be customer first, how to operationalize that insight. We talk a little bit about org structure, leadership, and management. I think the third part of our conversation, I really want to anchor around individual PMs, how we think about our career and how we level up. I think one question from Yuri was, what were some of the skills and behaviors that you think differentiates a PM from good to great on their job?
There's lots of different skills that a PM has. There are PMs that are more technical, more analytical, more UI focused, more marketing focused. I feel like a PM, being a good PM, is one of the hardest jobs there are, because you have to wear so many different hats, and you have to align whatever your skills are to the job at hand. So you have to be nimble, and you have to say, okay, for this product, for this feature, this is what I need to do to get it out the door. And you can't be like, well, that's not my job, that's somebody else's job. Like, if you don't have enough QA resources and there's a problem with quality, you've got to jump in and do that. If you don't have a data analyst on the team, and I mean, you can say you need one, but sometimes resources don't allow, budget doesn't allow, you have to go in there and figure out how to analyze it. So you are the buck stops with you to make sure what you're working on is going to be great. So people who really take ownership of what they're doing, who care deeply about the customer, and don't kind of make excuses for why the product can't be good. There's Ben Horowitz has it's like 15 or 20 years old now, a good PM, bad PM. It's very short, and it's very stark, but it resonates. I don't think I would use the same language, but the idea is own it. Just take ownership, and then try and fix it. Try and find the resources you need. If you're not an expert in something, you don't know how to do the data analysis, find somebody in the company who can. But you have to figure out what it takes to do something, to build a great product.
I like it. I think the keywords, again, Robert, our user, asked this question around what kind of ability you need for PM. I think, Tamar, you have answered the question. Basically, whatever it takes to get the product out of the door, take ownership, right? Depending on the product.
Whatever the product needs at that point in time. Because there are going to be different points in time, sometimes where teamwork is more important, or sometimes where innovation is more important. And you have to understand what's going to move the needle for your business.
Own the outcome. I think Harrison has summarized. So Tamar, I wanted to understand a little bit about this other question, which I love to ask leaders a lot, because obviously you have an incredibly successful product career, engineering and product leadership career. A lot of times, on our LinkedIn profile, we never talk about failures or setbacks that we had. But I think what would be really, really inspiring and powerful is if you could share maybe some examples around difficult times in your career where things didn't go as planned or as expected, and how did you overcome that setback and challenge, and what did you learn from those experiences?
Everybody has failures. I have so many. I couldn't recount them all. There's failures in joining the wrong team, hiring the wrong person, starting a project that fails, not canceling a project fast enough. So they're basically all across the board, and it's all in how you deal with it. So everybody says this, but make the decision early. Make the decision fast and swift. It's painful, but there was, when I was at Google, I was new in the search team, and I had an APM, which is an associate product manager. And that the APM was working on a project, and it was their first week. And I said, go meet some of the other experienced people on the team. And they met with one of the directors who'd been there for years. Director, her first week on the job, sits her down and says, your project's going to fail. And she was devastated. And looking back, obviously there's a lot of learnings from that experience, which are, just very, very plainly obvious. But you kind of have to take those and learn from it and say, what did I do wrong? What could I have done to set this person up better? How do I make sure that I'm making decisions fast and early if it is wrong, and then correct it? So the biggest thing is, just like I talked about ownership for product management, is owning your mistakes and then correcting them and saying, okay, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. What did I do wrong? Analyze it and fix it.
Two things I take away from there. One is cut the loss early or make the decision swiftly, and then own that decision. Own your mistake, and it's okay to admit it that you made a mistake. I think Slack is one of the most exciting company that's at the forefront of deciding, what is the future of work. So in this post-pandemic world, what gets you most excited about the future of work?
Slack's mission has always been to make people's working lives simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And it was hard to get people to change how they worked. And what's most exciting is now everyone is coming to us. All the C-level executives, all of our customers are coming to us and saying, oh my God, I have to figure out how to work in this hybrid environment. Help. And so they're coming open to change and understanding that they need to change. Because I don't think this change is a new thing. When I was at Google, I managed an organization across 7 different countries, and most of the people were not in headquarters. It was a fully distributed team. And so you look at that and you say, well, that already wasn't working. We already people were not on equal footing. We had issues with the time zones. We had issues with flexibility. And now people are saying, oh, I'm going to be in a distributed environment. Some people are going to be in the office and some people aren't. Some people at headquarters, some people aren't. Well, we had this before. It's just nobody had the initiative or the desire to change it. But now people do. People want flexibility. Our studies say 94% of people want flexibility in when they work. And now companies are open to giving them, because enough companies are giving the flexibility that people will just leave and go to those companies. So they have no choice. And I think that's really exciting. I think what's exciting is we're seeing a change in how people work that will be better for people. All of our studies say, especially women and underrepresented minorities, feel better in the environment and the flexible, and it's more inclusive. We can hire people from anywhere when we hire people remote. So I'm really excited about that, and how Slack as a product can help making distributed and hybrid work better.
Absolutely. +1 to distributed and hybrid work. And back to your earlier point about hiring a diverse team that can help uncover unconscious bias in product and build better products. I know we're right around the clock. I want to close Chad with maybe one more question. So earlier in your sharing, you said one of the failure or setbacks you did was maybe hiring the wrong person or joining the wrong company at the wrong time. So what do you look for? What is your mental model when it comes to, or what your advice to people when they look for a new role, joining a new company, right? Are you prioritizing, your value that you can bring to the table, or what do you want to learn in that next role? How do you find the right opportunity that would pave way for the next job after this next job that you set yourself up for success?
So very simple answer, which is, for me, it's always people. I follow people, not companies or domains. I want to work with people who I'm going to learn from and who I'm going to enjoy working with. I don't want to work with jerks. That's really important to me. And I want to work for somebody who's kind and empathetic and who's really, really good at what they do, and I'm going to learn from. And I love the framing of this question, balancing what you bring and what you learn, because that's exactly the advice I give to people. When you go to a new job, you always want to bring something that's of value to that company, that that you're good at, that you've learned, and you want to learn something. If you go to a new job where you're just bringing and you're not learning, that's not good. You'll get bored. And if you do the opposite, where you're just learning and not bringing, you're not going to succeed, or it's going to be harder to succeed and it's going to be much more stressful. So that balance is a really good balance of how you think of it. And then if you get the people you're going to learn from, because you tend to learn from people more than you learn from anything else. And that's why, and this has helped me very much in my career. That is why I went to A9, is I wanted to work for Udi Manbar, who was my boss at the time. Each step that I've taken, when I went to Slack, I wanted to learn from Stuart Butterfield, who's kind of a legend in the product world. And I thought that having the opportunity to work for him would be amazing. And it has been. I've learned so much about product thinking and product development, even after decades working in the field, because it was the opportunity of working closely with someone like him.
I love that advice. So much time, I think, especially in Silicon Valley, sometimes you want to trace after, say, a unicorn company, but sometimes what's more important is the people that you work with and work for and learn from them and what you bring to the table, obviously, that right balance. We're right around at time. Tamar, thank you so much for joining us and for such thoughtful and insightful sharing. How can people stay in touch with you and follow your work?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamar. We get a lot of positive feedback from folks. There are a lot of questions, a lot of excitement, and thank you again for spending the time with us and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, guys.